As a standard, check sheets are available from the Canadian Green Building Council for these items that I recommend that you follow, or use them as a database to create your own for your firm. Here's a sample of a recycling content sheet. Material information sheet for lead. Another material information sheet. This is coming from the supplier for the reinforcing steel and showing how many tons went in. Remember, you have to also identify, it's not dollar value, it's by weight in many instances. This particular firm happens to be in Whitby, and they've got an 80 to 90% recycled content for their reinforcing steel. It's quite critical to look at your suppliers of your materials and are they available. The research has to be done in the design office before it goes to the contractor to make sure that you can actually get what you want in order to be able to meet these numbers. For that particular one, projects in Ontario for the reinforcing steel would be within the 240 kilometers that's required by lead for a rail distance. So any project in Ontario, if using that rebar, could count. We've developed within the firm tally sheets that go right into the specifications at the time we're going out to tender. So the contractor sees these forms, he knows that he's got to fill them out at the time of bidding. They'll be reviewed again at the startup meeting and at the monthly meetings. But it helps substantially for the charts to be there, clear, concise, and they know what's expected of them each and every time. This is a waste reduction work plan, waste tracking record, recycled content record, regional material records of the materials, where they come from, how far did they have to travel. And again, it's different. It's 800 kilometers if it's by truck, 2,400 kilometers if it's by rail. This has to be taken into account. But you can only prove it if you've got the waybill to show how it was transported. You just can't say, well, this came from Ottawa, it must have come by rail. If it came by truck, sorry, you lose. Certified wood record, Craig touched on this. Again, there's a chain of custody for the wood that you have to show from the forest where it was cut down and grown and cut down all the way to when it arrived on site. If you haven't got it and they've delivered materials fabricated from plywood, you can't get it after the fact. And that's why you don't pay them. You don't pay them 90%, 50%, you don't pay them nada for that particular portion, because you may have to pull it out and you'll have to do it all over again because you're looking for this. And it just takes once. You turn around with your contractor or subcontractors and say, no, you didn't provide the documentation, I'm not paying for it, pull it out, you've got to do it again. This is where ongoing dialogues between the contract administrator and representative for the contractor on site help tremendously. Summary of the contracts administration for lead. They've got to name who's going to be their lead facilitator. A small project, it could be the superintendent. A larger project, due to the immense amount of paperwork, there may be one individual dedicated strictly to all the paperwork that's required for the documentation for lead. They work closely with our lead coordinator, who's identified the points, tracked them, and is looking for them to come in. You have to understand the paper process and why it's important. Create a lead action plan. Demonstrate your understanding of what you're responsible for. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry if not written down. And this is where the specifications come in, because we've documented it. They're taking that, extracting that information, and putting it into an action plan for the project. There's many things that the contractor is responsible for under lead. Erosion sediment control plan. They have to submit the photographs of it. It's up to the contractor as how he's going to do that. It's not up to the design firm to tell him how to do his work. but what the end result is. So a lot is up to the contractor in this regard, but he's got to document and prove that he's meeting the requirements. You don't make a payment for any material that arrives on site until you've got these up front to prove that you're getting what you asked for. And the other part is to make sure, as through any construction and design process, that there's change orders that come about, supposedly equal materials of lesser cost for savings to the owner, or that are more readily available. You have to be very careful with those because they may not meet the initial requirements. So again, our representative on site has to be aware of what the requirements are when they're looking at these proposed changes. Summary of contractors administration lead provide total construction costs. This excludes mechanical, electrical, and general conditions according to lead for the tabulations. Update on a regular basis as administration of change orders and allowances occur, because this will evolve, and as any project, there's going to be changes. It has to stay within the guidelines. Contribute toward lead progress reports with the progress claims, lead partnering conference with the subcontractors, and additional meetings need to be set up as new subcontractors come on board. As you've seen from the few examples that I've given, a substantial amount, although it's given from the contractor to the architect, it's coming from the subcontractors, the suppliers, the distributors, and they need to be aware of it. The unfortunate part is you may have your startup meeting initially and the contractor is well aware of it, but some subtrades and suppliers only come in at the tail end of the project. So they have to be educated as well as what's going to be required for this new project. No one intends to do a bad job. I sincerely believe that all contractors, suppliers, subcontractors want to do the best they possibly can, but they need to know what the expectations are in the first place. Site meetings, which site meetings you focus on lead projects? It should be an agenda for every single site meeting. The critical ones are going to be the project startup and project closeout. Startup to make them aware at the beginning, project closeout, make sure that everything has come in. Summary of lead requirements. What needs to be submitted when and for what? Conclusion. Contractors, subcontractors come late in the process but have a huge impact on the process. Specifications describe the commitment to lead, but the contractors are the one that's controlling the costs. They always are. Contractor team is integral to the success of the project and the lead effort. Without them on board, you're not going to make it, no matter how well you design it. Procurement management documentation is required. Document, document, document. And the specification is the prime place to put all that information. Education of the subtrades and the suppliers of what's required, because that's where the source of all the information is coming from. Determine involvement by construction division in the specifications. Keep the big picture in mind of what's required for a lead. Refer to the appropriate lead reference guide. I gave you a few examples there. And don't fall behind, because you can't catch up. If you miss in one of the submittals, you can't come back and get it later on.
Well, I'd like to thank you guys for